for-profit companies that are very invested in seeing where the technology can go. And in terms of allowing these things to scale, we believe that artificial intelligence is going to be a really key ingredient to move this into a new phase. So first of all, I'd like to thank American Council of the Blind for their partnership in putting this together. Eric Bridges and Tony Stevens have been very close colleagues and friends since I came aboard Verizon 2.5 years ago. And I'm particularly excited that we got to do this today because it's a way of us saying farewell to Tony Stevens, who is going to be stepping away from American Council of the Blind. He'll still be a key leader within the organization, just like he always has, but he's transitioning to a smaller nonprofit in Baltimore. For any of you who have worked with Tony, obviously he is an extremely warm, extremely knowledgeable person who brings expertise to the table, but also a wonderful manner that connects him with people inside and outside of disability. To know Tony is to love him. So we're so glad that we could do this together, and let's everybody give Tony a hand for his many years of distinguished service at ACB, but then I'll just hand it over to him if he's not beat red.
Thank you so much, Zach. And I would be remiss if not to say especially thanks to you and to Verizon, really for offering this opportunity for us to engage on a really exciting issue. You know, as Zach mentioned, I am no longer as the Director of Advocacy, where I'd worked so much with so many of you in this room over the past several years on the issues dealing with AI and the technological space and advancements and really thinking about the future. I, as a family person, am now leading a nonprofit in Baltimore that focuses specifically on families, in a sense, my own future as someone with 2 young sons. So I'm excited to be Executive Director for this new opportunity in another nonprofit, but I'm still an ACB member because it is a membership organization as well, so you have not gotten rid of me yet, Zach. But very excited today for this opportunity. You know, in setting up today's panel, I want to just first say thanks to everybody here that came to attend. We're also streaming this on Facebook, so welcome to everybody on Facebook right now that is watching this on our Facebook live stream through the American Council of the Blind. You can hashtag American Council of the Blind, I think, if folks or anybody wanting to find it on your phones. If you're getting bored and looking down, I won't be able to tell, so that's fine. But to that end, we're very excited to have, in a sense, really 3 critical thought leaders in the space of the conversation we're having today. In setting up the conversation, I am and this is why you're not going to get rid of me so easily, I am a science fiction nerd. There's no question about it. When I was a child, I never played sports because of my blindness, so I dug myself into rooms and read books by Arthur C. Clarke and all these people that dreamed big. We are at a point technologically where there are dreamers making dreams become reality. It's a very exciting time. When you think back to those old days of, you know, the year 2000 in our textbooks and how we'd have flying cars, the cars aren't flying today, but they're doing some very impressive things around the world. And technology in general, I think it's fair to say, is at a new horizon. We've been calling this era sort of the next industrial revolution based in technology. Lots of transformations in the way that our society is really transforming as a direct result of the technology when it comes to employment. But more so, I think it's fair to say that in the space for people with disabilities, this is where an exciting new horizon is. You know, the U.S. Census Bureau reports that there's roughly 56 million Americans in the United States who have some form of disability that impedes their activities during some point of the day. There's millions of Americans, for our own experience, of my experience in the blindness sphere, but also as on the board for the Consortium for Citizens for Disabilities that I sit on as well, on the board of directors. You know, we focus a lot in our technological space at really trying to understand where we are with technology and how can it empower versus how can it impede. So in that sense, I am very privileged that we have 3 wonderful panelists today who are thought leaders in this space of technology. And in a sense, we're not going to dive into the weeds too much, but, you know, I think understand the broad perspective, but can also dive into those weeds and really understand. Just sitting to my right for those facing the stage right now is Anirudh Koul. Anirudh is the head of AI and research for AIRA, and he'll give a demonstration for AIRA in a minute for folks that don't know what it is. But AIRA is a company based out of San Diego that is really leading the way at using AI and using technology to really augment sensory perception in a way that is changing the lives of people that are blind around the country. I think recently they were announced as, was it Time? Time magazine and I'll let Anirudh brag about AIRA in a minute. But, you know, we're excited to have AI and folks that are really diving into finding solutions in the disability space today, but exciting for the future. Also exciting to have up here is Reagan Payne, who manages emerging technology policy with General Motors based here. Before that, she was at Cruise. Folks from the San Francisco area maybe know of Cruise because they're working very much hard at sort of mapping forward the future of autonomous vehicles with GM's commitment. Reagan has helped leading the way around policy, and we'll talk a little bit about policy later on. But welcome Reagan as well, because she's an excellent, in a sense, leading that space of something that will transform us, not just people with disabilities, but on a larger space, all of society around the world, when we'll talk a little bit later about how that's placing around the world. And last but not least is David Grossman. David is the Executive Director for the GPS Alliance, focusing in on, in a sense, when this is very critical when we talk about the infrastructure, but the idea that we, in a sense, where we've gone over 20, 30 years with global positioning and being able to understand the way that we communicate with humans, communicate with technology, that has to be done through a platform, and GPS Alliance is in the center stage of that. So what I'm going to do, in a sense, is the first question for this panel, in sort of offering this introduction, very brief as it was, I'd like each of you just to take a second to talk about your current space now. Where are we today in your own space of what you're working at, and some of the things you're working on, because we're going to be bridging this in more closely to people with disabilities in a minute. But we all have sort of large umbrellas. So what are some of those umbrellas that you all are currently working under right now? And I'm going to throw it to you first, Anirudh.
All righty. Hi, everyone. So I'm a boring techie who gets excited when technology actually starts working and is not in a research lab. So I'm working here at AIRA, which is providing remote assistance for the blind community. And how about if I show a very quick demo just to get an idea of what this technology does? Sounds all right? All righty.
Definitely.
So basically the idea is remote assistance brought to you wherever you are on your device, whether it's a smartphone or your phone. So I have a phone open right now, and I'm just going to press the button on it, and let's see what happens. You know, when people keep the phone on mute? Hi, Jessica. How are you?
Do we have her?
Let's give it one last try. Can you listen to me? My phone is on mute for sure, and that's why I brought a backup piece. All right, let's try it again. 3. My phone is high, so as I said, technology sometimes doesn't work. So let's give it a try. 3, 2, and 1. All right, this is.
There we go. I hear Chloe now.
Yeah, how about I give a demo quickly? But the whole idea being that a person who is blind is wearing a smart glass, and the camera on it is streaming the view to a person sitting somewhere remotely and is able to explain the description of things around you. So you are empowered to receive the information and decide what you want to do with it. So if you're going for polling, you know, a few weeks back, whether you are trying to decide which dress would impress your boss in the morning, or you know, someone playing a game between the dog and an agent to figure out who will get to the chocolate first on the ground. Right? These are some of the fun examples, but they are examples of someone going and running the Boston Marathon, because you can get some descriptions when they are important, or sitting in the front of the row in your daughter's wedding and knowing what is happening at each point. Examples like that are brought because there's a human connection there. But if you could use AI to enhance that thing that the people are trying to do, I mean, that would be incredible. So we're working at AIRA where AI and remote assistance combined to see how we can make people more productive with the help of giving a human connection and AI alongside. And I'll see if I can run the demo quickly.
Hi, all. My name is Reagan Payne, and I'm with the Emerging Technologies Policy Team here in Washington, D.C. with General Motors. So what we're hyper-focused on is creating automated technology to ultimately save lives. So back in 2016, General Motors acquired Cruise Automation, which is a self-driving car startup based in San Francisco. And this startup is developing the technology that's then fully integrated into the Chevy Bolt platform, which is our fully electric vehicle. This partnership has allowed us to put 180 vehicles out on the roads that are testing today in complex urban environments in downtown San Francisco. And these 180 vehicles go through what's called fleet learning. So when one vehicle experiences a complex interaction out in the real world, the entire fleet gets smarter based on that one vehicle's experience. So we're really excited about the technology. It is rapidly developing. We've said that we will be ready to launch in 2019, but have a commitment that we will not launch until we are convinced that it is safe to do so. Kind of how these work is, if you think of Ubers and Lyfts today, they're operating in ride-sharing fleets, and that's the same kind of model that our cars are operating on. It's a ride-sharing fleet, so shared vehicles operating on a ride-hailing app, and a fully electric as well. And we're thrilled about this technology because we see a future of transportation as one with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And we are convinced that the autonomous vehicles that we're developing with Cruise will help us achieve that vision. And we're thankful to be partnering with a lot of folks in this room to make sure that this solution means better accessibility for all people.
Excellent. Thank you, Reagan. David.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm David Grossman. First, thanks to Tony and Zach for having me a part of this discussion today. And it's great to see so many familiar faces in the room from my time at the FCC and on Capitol Hill. First, just a little bit of introduction to our organization, the GPS Innovation Alliance. We started about 5 years ago, soon to be 6 years ago in 2013. We are a trade association based here in DC with a mission to promote, protect, and enhance GPS. Over the years since we started, some of the issues that we've focused on most closely, spectrum policy, of course, given that it is a satellite-based service that depends on spectrum. A remarkably small amount, just about 60 megahertz, is what allows GPS to work on a global basis. We've also been focused on security and resiliency to ensure that when you're using a device or application, you can count on GPS to work. You know, I think when I think about AI, to me, as I was kind of doing my homework, getting ready for this discussion, the term artificial intelligence dates back, in fact, to the 1950s. So the term, while it was academic for many years, and now we're seeing in practical terms, to me, it's involving vast amounts of data. And where GPS fits into that, we are one of those data streams that fits into the broader AI conversation. So the location data is getting better and better. As more satellites are launched, GPS is becoming more accurate. We're moving from the days that people remember of 10 to 20 meters accuracy now to 3 to 5 and even centimeter level accuracy in a lot of different applications, which of course is very relevant as we have the accessibility conversation. So looking forward to being part of this, and turn it back to Tony.
Yeah, thank you, David. And I'm going to throw it back to you, though, in a second, because now, you know, I think setting up the conversation then and getting a sense of, you know, sort of some things that are trickling out there, if it's AV or if it's AIRA, but where have we come so far in a sense of AI and focusing on people with disabilities? I'm thinking, David, and you talking about the satellites, to any folks that are visually impaired in the room, maybe remember 20 years ago, was it the backpacks? What did we have when GPS first came out? You know, it was sort of like this DoD type thing, and it was such an incredible experience to think of the idea that you could navigate without having to ask people. And when we talk about AI, that's in a sense what we're talking about, the idea that, in a sense, machines are aiding and assisting us in overcoming the challenges or barriers, not just for people with disabilities, but anything, right? Making our lives easier through technology. David, I'm going to throw it to you real quick and talk a little bit about where are we in a sense. You talked about sort of bandwidth and technical sense. What are some of the real applications that some of this stuff is being used for today in an everyday life?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'll tie this back to a personal example for me, visiting the Perkins School for the Blind a couple of years ago. I think it put it in perspective for me that one of the big changes, particularly that we've seen in the last decade or two, is the commercialization of technology, making it off the shelf of what used to be very expensive. So whether it be a mobile app that you can download and enables you to navigate to the nearest bus stop. In the agriculture space, for example, precision agriculture is a hot area where we're seeing centimeter level accuracy, self-driving tractors that can assist farmers in watering, laying fertilizer, pesticides, with that centimeter level accuracy. We see it in the smart cities context in terms of real-time information on when the next bus or train is going to come. We're seeing it in the Internet of Things context, autonomous vehicles, drones, smartwatches. I mean, you could really go through the list and realize that GPS is no longer just about turn-by-turn navigation or rideshare services, but it's a part of everything that we do in our lives.
And you mentioned smart cities in a sense. Reagan, I'm going to throw it to you now with a question. You know, in a sense that the AV space is very much critically reliant on, you know, the space that it exists within. And we talk about, and this is in a sense not just for all people with you know, oftentimes blindness gets seen as the great aid and benefactor of GPS in a sense of being able to let us know where we are. But when we talk about the Internet of Things and devices being working intelligently in a space, you know, to share a little bit about how that is unfolding with Cruise and GM and these vehicles becoming intelligent, because it's also too, if someone's in a wheelchair and is in an autonomous vehicle, it needs to know that it can drop them off at a wheelchair accessible entrance even, and the way that this all can unfold. So how are the vehicles being smarter in these communities and spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to connect the dots as well, you know, our autonomous vehicles as well as level 2 automated systems all rely on GPS as well. So we currently have Super Cruise, which is a level 2 automated system that relies on GPS, as well as a map that's on board of the vehicles that allows that localization to 2 centimeters accuracy, which is incredibly accurate. And the same with our fully self-driving vehicles. We're able to locate those incredibly accurately, also because we have a high definition map on board that's helping aid the vehicle know where it is at all times. So our cars have LiDARs, radars, sensors, and wheel encoders that allow it to see 360 degrees around the car. That's really bringing huge safety benefits to society. So when you look at crash statistics, 94% of accidents are due to human error. And that's just really an unacceptable number that us as humans are not able to find ourselves in the environments where we are and have that high level of accidents and about 40,000 fatalities on our roads. And that includes pedestrian safety. I know we've spoken about challenges that people with living with disabilities often have as pedestrians. And so these cars are really going to be able to protect individuals both inside and outside the vehicle.
Being independent means not being afraid to, you know, move out in the community. My wife always jokes, says I have bad karma because I've been hit by cars 3 times in my life. But you got to not be afraid in a sense. And so that technology is critical. I'm going to brag about you just for a second, Anirudh, because we didn't mention this at the beginning. Folks that might not know, Anirudh also was formerly with Microsoft and created an app that some may know called Seeing AI. If you haven't checked that app out, it's free to download on iPhone. Still waiting for it on Android, but you can get it on Apple for free. Seeing AI for Artificial Intelligence, which is an outstanding app in really sort of, again, when we talk about AI, it's about, you know, how can technology make us more independent? Anirudh, where are we in that space? Where have we kind of come and where are we today with that on your side?
So I had the lucky story in life where I was working in a garage 5 years ago on seeing can deep learning and artificial intelligence be actually used for accessibility, and somehow figured out how to turn it into a day job. And now that artificial intelligence has actually started to give some results, it's on one hand really exciting to see what is the potential. On the other hand, there's such a long way to go ahead. There's so much to do. There are certain smaller bits of that we can do well, something very structured, something very for singular focused tasks that we can generally do well. In some, numbers made by researchers, computers can now recognize objects better than most humans can. The speech recognition rate has crossed human parity. So if you're a transcription specialist who does it at 200 words per minute, now you can do that as equally well with the same error rate of 6% with the computers. So these are really promising numbers, but we are just getting started here. And just to not be the Debbie Downer here, these are the headlines you'll read in newspapers. But when you try to convert that research into a product, you start noticing this doesn't work yet. There is when you see the research papers, they are basically based on some data set that was collected. But now when you go towards industry, when you are working on self-driving cars, you try to convert that research into a product so that it works for the person intended. There's such a long way to go, and it's the engineers, designers, and the policy makers who have to convert it into something which is the product that works.
Let's dive into that a little, because that moves us into a conversation on constraints. What are some of the, there's some obvious constraints in society today, and for those that are engaged on like digital infrastructure reform here in the room, and maybe watching on Facebook, there's only so much you can do. Does anybody remember the old 9600 baud modems, or even lower than that, like 2400, that would make that chirping noise whenever you logged on, and you would wait and you would wait and it would slowly download. When you look at where we're at in the future with 5G and other technologies, we're still not there yet, right? And what are some of the constraints we're wrestling with right now, each of you in sort of your space?
So I'll give a quick answer. So I'll first tell you the good news. 5 years ago, if you had to train a system to recognize images, you're expecting about 2 months of training time. So you set the experiment, you go to a vacation, come back 2 months later, and then that's you get your first experiment result. Yesterday, the paper came out where you can train it in 2 minutes. So from 2 months to 2 minutes, and there's a span of 5 years. So that's exciting, which means you can do a lot more. So happy news there. Now let's talk about what are the constraints. One part being, so actually I see two of them. Recently, the Department of Commerce came out with a proposal to restrict the export of artificial intelligence. And the entire reason why in the last 5 years, this whole wave of artificial intelligence has come up is because people can work collaboratively. Research is open. One person can piggyback on the other person's results and do amazing things. So that's one thing that I want people to be aware that's happening. Now, when we talk about the area of accessibility, a key issue that I have often faced is in the regulation space of medical devices. The moment you say the word that this is something intended for a person with a disability, it immediately, because of the gray language of the paper it's printed on, becomes a medical device, even if it's not. It's not a pacemaker. It's not a medical implement, but by definition, it becomes. So for someone working in this space, that becomes one additional headache to get the technology in the hands of people quickly and efficiently out.
On the transportation space, Reagan, what are some of the constraints you all are faced with?
Sure, absolutely. So, I guess what keeps me up at night is that we have a team of incredibly talented designers and incredibly talented engineers who are rapidly developing this technology. So since General Motors and Cruise partnered, we've released 4 different vehicle models, which is an unheard of pace of innovation in the auto industry. So while this technology is rapidly developing and while these cars are rapidly getting smarter as more and more test miles are put in, the reality is that our rules and regulations just don't move as quick as the pace of innovation. So we're hyper-focused to try to see federal legislation passed that creates a framework for these vehicles to be deployed. And absent of getting these rules and regulations right here at home, we're going to see other countries potentially move ahead in kind of this race to automated vehicles. And we have to do this smartly too. So looking at state bills, the last state session, we saw about 77 bills introduced relating to autonomous vehicles. Some of them well-intentioned, but some of them had provisions that required licensing for humans using automated vehicles. And why us at General Motors had an issue with that is that then precludes people who can't pass driving tests from using the automated vehicles. And so when we're thinking about getting the rules and regulations right, we have to make sure that we're not putting in requirements that could then, not mean this technology is for everybody.
How about on your end, David, some of the constraints you all are seeing?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the good news, which is that thanks to the stewardship of the U.S. Air Force, which is the agency that manages the GPS satellite constellation, the reliability of the satellites is incredibly strong. And so what we're also seeing is continued improvements in accuracy and reliability as new generation of satellites is launched. As I mentioned, we have seen various generations over the years. Today, there are 31 active satellites in the constellation. There's a new generation of satellites known as GPS-3. The first of those are expected to launch next month. And as devices incorporate an updated chipset to be able to receive that new civil GPS signal, you're going to see improvements directly in your devices. I think the things that keep us up at night, the spectrum used by GPS, navigation spectrum, the signal coming to the ground is incredibly weak. It's equivalent to less than a 50-watt light bulb. And so when we think about spectrum policy issues, we need to ensure that GPS spectrum can operate without interference from other services. So ensuring that GPS is grouped with like services is a critical policy. And then from the security point, obviously there are a lot of efforts that have been in place to address resiliency and reliability, including the work of the Air Force. But there are those out there who have nefarious purposes to interfere or jam the GPS signal. And so that's something that we're constantly working on to root those jammers out. They are illegal under FCC rules, but ensuring that those can't be purchased or used that could potentially disrupt the signal.
Reagan, you had mentioned something, and it makes me think, David, just what you're talking about on a global level, since what we're talking about with satellites particularly is global. There was an article recently this week that talked about Didi, which is the rideshare company in China, has 550 million subscribers. I think anybody would love to have that subscribing level, I think, in any platform. But it's just impressive to think, and they're talking about having to, as they move into the AV space as well. And I know in 5G, there's conversations about who's leading the way with 5G around the world, who's going to kind of set the gameplay. Satellites are all over the world, David. Where does the United States stand right now in a sense of where we are with AI and our technology? And is it the kind of thing that we are working in harmony with the rest of the world? Is there a sense of, is the competition helping us? What are some of the areas around that space globally that we're looking at now?
Sure. Yeah. So, we're paying attention to kind of globally what the thinking is around autonomous vehicles right now. So, there's a big process going on in Europe, WP29. China's obviously very active on AVs. And we're very fortunate that NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration here in the US, has been really proactive with autonomous vehicles. So in October of this year, NHTSA released its third federal automated vehicle policy guidance, which kind of outlays how the agency is thinking about automated technology. We really respect and appreciate kind of our national leaders taking a leadership in sound policy that allows for innovation here at home. We're also seeing movement in the House and Senate. We have a bill in the Senate, the AV START Act, that's hoping to get some floor consideration this Congress, and ultimately reconciled with the House version, because having a federal framework for autonomous vehicles is really important domestically for these cars to reach everyone and for us to see the benefits of self-driving vehicles. So a lot of activity, a lot of discussion happening at a global level. And I'm very encouraged by what the United States is doing and really hope to continue seeing leadership from our country with autonomous vehicles, because we have a lot of people testing here, both domestic companies as well as international companies in San Francisco and other cities. And it's important for us to maintain this leadership in global auto innovation.
On an accessibility front, Anirudh, I know AIRA is looking beyond the U.S. as well and opportunities to try to use its technology to leverage greater independence for people with disabilities. Are we seeing anything on a global, what are some things maybe you're experiencing where accessibility is? Is the U.S. in a sense still in that model of we sort of innovate and the world follows? Are there other countries that are leading the way as well in AI that you're noticing for disability issues?
So in the space of AI, if you just take the three leaders, it would be US, obviously number one. China is catching up really fast. And the third one is Canada, which is often considered one of the the fathers of the area of deep learning, because people back in the 1980s were sitting in the winter of deep learning when nobody believed them, but they had invented this stuff. It's just that it took it 30 years to get popular somehow. So in the area of accessibility, when it comes to, US is again the leader. But I can say that in Canada, the government is giving ridiculous support for in the form of funds and in the form of encouraging startups to grow and see the potential uses of AI, also in the space of accessibility. So I think US is the model so far. And as AIRA, as a company which wants to incorporate AI to do more things so that humans can start becoming more productive by the AI taking over some of the low-hanging fruits, the things that are more common, the things that are more repetitive. Could be maybe navigate a person who's blind in a building on its own by just giving simple guidance, or maybe trying to find objects around you. Maybe those kind of things can be taken over by AI. So by going over to other countries, what we notice is some of the wordings, the way you speak for an object might be different, as an example. So, but scaling it is an easier thing once proven in US. So it's always a great starting point.
One of the things that's exciting to think about is when we make it macro in a sense of global, because we find it's not just on blindness related issues, but for all issues with people with disabilities, is that oftentimes we're seen as a niche, right? We're seen as a small population that it's hard to reach that economy of scale where innovation and R&D will focus specifically on this area. But when we start to think globally, and like what you said about Canada, the idea of technologies and things that are being born in other countries, they can come here. Like there's sort of this interconnectedness, I would imagine. Am I right in thinking that particularly when we sort of find ways to do solutions, what's taking place in Canada very well in their sort of thought leaders and think tanks or R&D eventually is going to matriculate within our own opportunities here in the U.S. for thinking about ways we can leverage independence and greater access?
Absolutely. And I'd almost take that a step further and even look at what different cities are doing to increase accessibility and learnings happening between cities too. So, in terms of your question kind of about learnings and applying innovations in one area to another area, we're excited about how AVs can interact with existing transportation structures in different cities, and really identifying maybe where paratransit isn't serving populations or where areas of underserved folks are living, and really understanding how our vehicles can interact within that city on a hyper local level. So we have 180 vehicles again in San Francisco, and teams really looking at areas that we need to be focusing these cars in terms of they're underserved, and making sure that individuals have mobility options. I'm just excited to get more of these cars on the road. One of my good friends, Lindsay, told me a story about paratransit wasn't available for her to get to church on Sundays, and that is just completely unacceptable. And so, really understanding how these vehicles are interacting with existing infrastructure, understanding first and last mile needs in different cities, and then taking those learnings and applying them to new areas where these cars could go. That really gets me excited. And to your point, Tony, is a great area for us to continue learning from what's working in different communities.
So,
go ahead.
I just wanted to add some a different angle to it, because we are talking about going international. We noticed that we worked on an app for enabling people with vision loss to read text more easily. And we noticed a very unusual use. People in China were using it to read English and to basically spell out how the words are spoken, and they're practicing their English. We noticed people with learning disabilities and autism were using it, even though it was built for a different population. And that brings to the whole angle of universal design, where you build for one population, but think inclusively of including everyone. And that leads to more innovations. And like in a similar way, since you're talking about the mainstream part of things, most of technology that's mainstream today was invented often for a reason related to accessibility. The typewriter was invented because in the 1800s, because a person was trying to get legible written letters from her blind lover, so invented a typewriter. The telephone was invented because Alexander Graham Bell was trying to build hearing devices for his mother and wife, and accidentally invented the telephone. Your podcast today on audible.com, in 1930s, Royal National Institute for the Blind used to have gramophone records. And even your OCR, your photocopier, your Siri, text-to-speech, all were invented because someone wanted to read books one day for the first time. And this is a great ploy to think of the future by working on an issue which is so hard today. And you can just imagine that AI, by focusing on one community, especially the blind community, which is probably the most extreme form of when it comes to building something usable, can invent the future in the next 10 years, 20 years, which we don't even know what it will be.
Yeah. Well,
Tony, could I
David,
just come back to the global point? I mean, obviously, the U.S. has been the global leader on GPS now for almost 4 decades. It actually goes back to 1978. But a lot of the reasons why you can take a device, say that you purchased here in the U.S. and be in Europe and GPS works just as it does in the US, or that you could buy a device in Europe that has GPS embedded into it, is because there has been international cooperation on these issues. And the other point that I'd make, and I think this also ties into the accessibility conversation, is there are other nations that are working on their own global navigation system. For example, in Europe, Galileo, may remember actually this month at the FCC, they approved a waiver order that permits the use of Galileo in U.S. devices. And so you're seeing a lot of cooperation on the international stage, and that's a good thing. The more signals that are being incorporated into a device, the better accuracy you're going to get, the better reliability and better resiliency. So I think that's a trend you're going to continue to see more of.
And I think these are important messages to hear as moving into the 116th Congress. My hope is that we can begin to thinking of policies and ways to really expand digital infrastructure reform in this country, to start thinking about ways that we can not just, sort of break down any constraints that gets us to the technology where we can get 1 gigabyte of download per type data with, if it's in 5G or dealing with satellite communications, how we can expand things, if it's smarter cities, if it's working in the autonomous vehicle space. But essentially, I think, David, something you are talking about is very critical in this whole conversation, right? And that is in a sense that we are at an exciting opportunity. There's no question about it. But we still have some steps to do. We still have some ways to go. And when we talk about universal, going back to Anirudh, we were talking about sort of the universal design, right? We've talked a lot about blindness, but there are still issues and concerns around like folks with physical disabilities, with wheelchairs, being able to access traditional cars, because we know a lot of this space is. On terms of policy, You know, I think when I lived in Mexico City, the VW Bug was the taxi cab, and they ripped out the front seat, and you could cram 6 more people in that taxi cab. It was always blew my mind how many people could fit in a VW Bug in Mexico City. But we're still constrained by regulations that say you can't move the steering wheel column and the brakes, right, Reagan? So there's a lot of areas, and this is a policy town, right? DC is all about policy. I know that. And in a sense, though, with our crystal ball, right? I want to sort of start bringing us home to 2 main areas, right? The short-term policies. Where can we be focusing the future going into the new Congress in ways, and this isn't maybe specific bill numbers or legislations now that could be reintroduced, but getting rid of these constraints. What are some of the policy obstacles? And then we're going to sort of close it out with the larger crystal ball science fiction question at the end. But what are some policy areas we can talk about? You mentioned commerce, Anirudh. Any others?
You mentioned,
David,
Tony, on 5G and connectivity. Obviously, GPS works as a standalone without needing a high-speed broadband connection if you have maps downloaded locally onto a device. But when you talk about some of these next-generation applications, whether it's, say, a drone that's doing aerial photography and collecting gigabyte levels of data, high-speed connectivity and low latency are going to be critical. And when GPS and that high-speed connectivity are combined together, it opens up a whole new slew of applications and services. And AIRA, I think, is a great example of that. It was one that I saw a demonstration of a couple of years ago, and that we highlighted in a blog post we did a couple months ago, because we're thinking about there are many different technologies that are going to play a role here. GPS is one of them. High-speed connectivity, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, LiDAR, radar, etc.
Excellent.
For us, there's federal motor vehicle safety standards that really apply to traditional autos that just don't really work for what the future of mobility looks like. So if anyone wants a copy of this, I brought our self-driving safety report. And if you look here, there's no steering wheel, there's no steering column. You simply see 2 passenger seats. And that's because the vehicles we're designing are fully automated and do not need human driver controls to operate safely. But because our rules and regulations can't really contemplate the thought of a vehicle maybe without a steering column that's as safe as a vehicle, it has a passenger seat and it's proven safety. We just really need a pathway to figure out what that's going to look like. How do we make sure these vehicles are safe? So we're really excited to see, some way to, if it's rulemaking or federal legislation, to see updated federal motor vehicle safety standards that contemplate what our future vehicles will look like, to really enable populations to benefit from these vehicles. And an important component of that is that we're still working on the technology too. So we're holding focus groups with different organizations and folks living with disabilities to really understand what interacting with our vehicle looks like. And we're going to continue innovating and continue improving these products for people living with disabilities based on these learnings. We've already gotten incredible feedback that has fundamentally changed what our product looks like based on focus groups and discussions we've had with people living with disabilities. And so just, as we're contemplating laws, we need to make sure they're flexible to enable and allow this continuous innovation to move forward for both safety benefits, societal benefits, and increased mobility benefits. So making sure, broadly speaking, that the laws we're working on are not too prescriptive is really important as well.
And Anirudh, other than grants for R&D research and the millions and billions of dollars that you would love to probably have come your way, what areas do you?
Yes, please. If I actually had a single request, it's that whenever an AI discussion comes, do not start with the phrase, so when is AI going to take over our jobs? When are we going to become, when is the robots going to become our overlords? And actually, my life has been ruined by James Cameron, because when he brought in the Terminator, I saw the movie, I said, I want to become that guy who can build that robot. And so my career trajectory became that. And now when AI is actually starting to make some promise, that's the question that keeps getting asked every week. And the reality is that we are far, far away. And even if we build and design AI as policymakers, as developers and designers, we have to think of how we can use this AI to make people productive, to work with their life, so that the AI actually starts to blend into your own human life. And it's not like some extra piece of technology that's completely changes your context. And that's where the magic of us all combining together to develop our future comes into place. So be happy and expect better things.
And that's an exciting sort of thought to end on, moving into my final question for y'all, because we want to be able to take time for a few questions as well from the audience here. 30 seconds, if you had a crystal ball, you know, when I was a kid, sci-fi, flying cars, come on, Reagan, start working on that, and folks with GM. But no, where, you know, short term, next Congress, we have a sense. 10, 20 years, where do you think we're at?
Yeah, so I mean, we've said that we're ready to deploy next year, and so that this technology is rapidly advancing, and you know, we already have 180 vehicles testing in San Francisco, Arizona, and Detroit. So it's real and it's coming. Other companies are rapidly innovating too, and I'm excited for what the next few years hold, because we really see that the true safety benefits of self-driving cars are realized when our roads are fully automated too. So I'm encouraged that hopefully we'll see more and more you know, crash prevention and smart technology on our roads, leading into fully automated vehicles, you know, in the coming years, because that's where the safety benefits really reach society.
And I'd say for us, centimeter level accuracy, we have it today already in a number of devices, and I think over time you're going to continue to see more and more devices incorporate that, so that you're going from 3 to 5 meters to centimeter level, and I recognize you know, those with visual impairments. That can be a game changer.
So smart autonomous wheelchairs in the future, maybe 10, 20 years as well. Things like that. Maybe we can put it all in there. Anirudh, I throw it to you.
I was just saying closer, not 10 years, 20 years for the autonomous wheelchairs. But yeah, if I say in 10 years, computers who can actually understand the meaning behind what you're trying to convey, the context behind it, will start to get pretty close to, I mean, it's a mirage right now, but you know, they start to actually work. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. And if I probably have to see the value of it, especially in the community that I work with, the blind community, right now the students who enter college, 60% of them drop by the time of graduation, sadly. And I would imagine, similarly in the unemployment side, there's a 70% rate of unemployment in this community. So I'd expect that in the next 10 years, those rates would drop dramatically. And I'm not saying like by 10%, 20%, but like imagine in about a generation, which is like in about 30 to 40 years, by like to 10% of the current value. So that would be the value that AI and technology, by combining 5G, IoT, all the word jargon that you can think, will come to life.
Excellent. You know, I want to take time just for a couple minutes for questions from the audience. Do we have a microphone, Zach? I know we're almost up on an hour.
Perfect.
And folks
and
have
if you
day
wouldn't mind
jobs.
just identifying yourself before you ask your question.
Hi, I'm Judith Hellestein. I'm with Housing Associates, but I'm also representing a special interest group from the Internet Society on Accessibility. And then I have two questions. One is around security, as well as the Internet of Things and the cars and all the technology putting into. Always concerned about security of domain, security of against hacking. And another question relating to you on the self-driving cars is on the data, because a lot of autonomous vehicles have trouble with people with accessibility challenges, as they're looking at data at people who cross the street by going forward. But some people with accessibility sort of go backwards or go to sides, and that is also problematic for the self-driving cars. So those two questions I had.
Sure. No, thank you for those questions. So answering the second one first, in terms of the vehicle recognizing folks with sometimes unpredictable movements. on the roadways. So the reason we're testing in San Francisco is that we want our cars to interact with edge case situations as much as possible. So we ran a study that our cars in downtown San Francisco encounter 46 times more challenging experiences around the vehicle than our cars testing in Metro Phoenix area. And we welcome those challenges. So anything from a raccoon crossing the road, or bring it on, because kind of what I was talking about is that with fleet and machine learning, the cars get smarter. And so the more folks we interact with that have different user patterns, the more our cars interact with people in wheelchairs, the more our cars interact with those stepping on and off the curb, the better the vehicles get. And unlike a human, the vehicles are not distracted, drowsy, or drunk when they're driving. And so the car really is hyper-focused, and every second is making 10 times their decision to determine what the next predictive movement of the car will be. So layering on complex interactions, as well as just the ability of the machine to see better than humans, we're really encouraged with being able to identify folks crossing the road.
What about the data, the privacy issue as well? You mentioned a little, David, earlier. And I know privacy is an issue that's come up in AIRA as well sometimes with data.
Well, I'll make just a point with GPS that perhaps sometimes gets overlooked, is that it's a one-way service. So it's important to understand that the GPS satellites, they cannot upload location data. They cannot track one's location. And so that's often a point that I like to raise when you think about kind of how GPS fits into that broader conversation.
And just to add, one other exciting part about AI is that, again, a year back, if you had to run any of the AI systems, you had to run it on a server somewhere. So you had to send all your data. But now, step by step, it's coming to the edge on your own device, on your smartphone, inside the car. So the data that, if you want to preserve privacy, is not getting transmitted back for AI. And as phones get more powerful, as chips get more powerful, we'll start to notice that privacy is preserved, because the data is local to the user then and there.
Excellent. Right. You made me think. My wife sailed through Yosemite Park last year along cliffs, got to Pine Street in San Francisco, freaked out, could not drive in San Francisco. So I imagine it's 180 vehicles. That's a lot of data being collected every minute of the day.
Yeah.
Other question?
Hello. I just wanted to thank you all for all of your comments. And I also wanted to put in my little plug too about tomorrow. We're going to have a workshop at the FCC. And it's going to be about artificial intelligence as well. And I welcome all of you to attend. And then also, I believe it's from 9 to 2. There are going to be demos there, panelists talking about AI. And so I look forward to you all coming. You're welcome.
And was that Susie?
Susie, if someone wanted to go to the FCC website and learn more about that event, where would they go?
You can go to the homepage, and it is on the homepage of the FCC website, www.fcc.gov. And it is also being webcast.
Wonderful.
And there will be interpreters on site as well for the panel and live captioning.
So I can probably give a demo that actually works.
I'm sure, and people can come by afterwards, Anirudh, and get a chance to check it out. Any other questions, Zach? Do we have any other hands?
Just one moment.
Thank you, sir. Maybe we got time for 2 more. If they're...
Hi. Yeah, Anirudh briefly mentioned.
Could you name, please?
I'm sorry, Neil Bernstein. I'm from the Library of Congress.
Thank you, Neil.
And Anirudh briefly mentioned an improvement to employment prospects for people with disabilities. But I'm wondering if you can go a little deeper into. I'm wondering if you can go a little deeper into how artificial intelligence may improve those prospects.
So one of the things I have seen while working in this area is what people say when they experience something for the first time in their life. The phrases like first time in life, game changer. Why are they saying that? And it turns out that people get the confidence to do something that they have never experienced before. And they go from, can I do this, to what else can I do? They get the confidence and they go for it. So someone having the confidence that they can go for a job interview. AIRA provides services where if you want to go for a job preparation, job interview, we will provide you free AIRA minutes, so go for it. Best of luck, we'll be with you. If you are trying to go to for education, many universities like University of California, 20,000 acres, you walk into the campus, AIRA becomes free. So a student who might have maybe trouble navigating the academic life now has a friend with you there. So by and now technologies like OCR, which could maybe ask and answer based on the books that you are reading. So instead of reading each and every letter boringly from top to bottom, now you can interactively ask. If you have a menu in front, maybe you could ask the question about what are the things that are vegetarian, as an example. But in these small little bites in life, as things start to mature, you start to interact with technology to do more than what you might have imagined. And we find that at AIRA, if we can employ more AI, we can make our agents more productive. We can make the users more productive to do whatever they want and make you more independent at the end of the day.
Yeah, and with self-driving vehicles too, there's some there's some benefits with mobility as well. Connecting people to options to get to work or maybe get to a job that's farther away as well. So really excited to see what self-driving vehicles can mean for job opportunities.
I actually just realized a great example, which would have probably answered your question much better. So about 2 weeks back, Intuit partnered with AIRA on small businesses. And the idea was that if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business, why don't you just open up your own shop? And within like the first week, 25 different businesses started because people were trying to take photographs of things in their home that they want to put online, and on Amazon, on Etsy, on eBay, all these places, or registered themselves. And we have previously worked on AI, which can take photographs and decide which is the best photograph amongst a bunch of photographs of an object you are trying to take. But by automating many of these, people now actually have income streams which are maybe elevated income streams than previously. And that's the promise AI and humans combined can bring together to the table.
At the end of the day, I think it's fair to say that when it comes particularly to the employment gap, it's about technology creating an equal playing space for people with disabilities, right? And it's the technology that makes us equal, and that makes us competitive, and that breaks down all misconceptions. So maybe someday we do have, was it LeVon Burton in Star Trek? Was he the person who was blind that had the technology? We need AIRA to look like that, whatever he wears. I want to thank the audience, but I most importantly want to thank our panelists here today. If we can give them a round of applause, please. I think they'll be available for a few minutes for folks to come up and ask any other questions. It's been truly a pleasure. Thank you all so much. For more information on this, feel free to tap anyone up here and engage. Hopefully we'll get a chance to interact some more on conversations like this in the new Congress and next year. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.